is the Page Publishing Book Club. How are you doing? I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. Robert Stirling is the police chief for the Harbor Police Department at the Port of New Orleans for 24 years. Still, he finds time to write at night and on the weekends. It took a while, but he finally self-published and soon wound up here at Page with his first novel entitled The Accidental Vigilante. Any truth to this, Robert?
No, it's strictly a crime fiction mystery thriller. I have over 50 years experience total as a police officer. Prior to my stint here, I was detective and police officer with the New Orleans Police Department. So having over 50 years of police work, shame on me if I couldn't come up with some interesting material for a crime drama. Although it does center around child abuse, and admittedly, I have never been assigned to the child abuse section, but it's always been a topic that is kind of important to me. The story, it's set in New Orleans, current day and time. It's about a computer nerd floundering with his father-in-law's business, has a lucrative position, and he witnesses a crime of violence, and he's reluctant to act. And the lady that he's watching this all take place almost gets killed. So he's on this guilt trip, and he wants to do something about it. So he decides he wants to become a New Orleans police officer. But that does not go well. He's bullied throughout the academy. He's labeled as an oddball, as an outcast, stuck on the night watch. Well, his wealthy father-in-law pulls a political favor and gets him assigned to the child abuse section. But he doesn't last very long there. His supervisor realizes he's too timid, doesn't have the stomach for it, so he washes him out, and now he's stuck on desk duty. Well, while he's there, he realizes there's a lot of corruption within the police department. He becomes aware that a lot of crimes are going uninvestigated. And that's bothering him because some of those crimes are crimes against children, sex abuse, and so forth. So he wants to do something about it. And he steals files out of the child abuse section, and he starts his own off-duty surveillance of these dangerous child predators. He uncovers a vicious crime syndicate where there's kidnapping and torture and murder. And as he starts to surveil and confront some of these suspects, several of them turn up dead. And suddenly he becomes a person of interest, although unknown. The police department realizes there may be a serial killer out there, and they're starting to look for that person, and he is a person of interest. So now he can't go to the police department to tell them what he's found, and he's on a strong lead of the people who are perpetrating these crimes. He finally figures it out that there's a criminal enterprise where children are actually kidnapped off the streets, abused, and turned over to this crime lord who videos these kids being tortured for money. People actually pay money for this. So on his own, he tracks down the individual, confronts him, but he's at a huge disadvantage. Finally, he overcomes the individual and kills him. Well, during his altercation with this crime syndicate master, if you will, the police surround the building where this is going on, and one of the police supervisors sees my lead character struggling with and shoots the lead character. So now, in spite of his tracking down this heinous criminal, he's shot by his own department.
Okay, don't say any more. This is some story you got here, and I don't want to ruin the ending for anyone. So you've had some successful book signings. You're doing promotions on your website.
I did some advertising in the New York Times, which went fairly well. I got a nice award from a book club. I'm moving along. I even have a friend who introduced me to his associate out in on the West Coast who asked me to put it in the form of a screenplay.
Well, not many authors make that connection. I wish you the best of luck, Robert. Thank you. A retired teacher, lawyer, and father of four who thought himself a writer when he was a teenager, Carlton Quino spent a long time putting together an 800-page book he hoped to get published one day. He wrote poetry along the way and in the end decided to publish the book of poetry. It is entitled Love at First Sight.
It looks at, relationships. It starts with non-relationships, that's why it's called Love at First Sight, as if it's from a distance. I do the binocular imagery of getting closer and closer. So the poems, maybe the first third of the book, is about these relationships that aren't really relationships. It's kind of like writing to somebody whose photo you've seen and you describe the person. And my goal is to see if I could recreate what the person looks like. Also flirtatious to some extent, but basically I'm trying to see whether or not I can paint with words. And that's the beginning. And then as the book goes on, I call it a little closer. And then I go into real relationships, either based on serious relationships that I had or people that I knew. And I get into it, by the end of it, I get into, family, children, and that element of love.
Very sweet.
Well, thank you. But the book has, it's multi-layered.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a whole section on topless dancers, about 5 pages. And it's my contention, I'm the only person probably who's ever written this well about topless dancers or who's written about them at all. And, I have a kind of an attitude towards, aesthetics, that if something is beautiful, I differentiate not much between just finding something beautiful and the feeling people describe as love. Okay.
Huh.
So Love at First Sight here is basically aesthetic approval. It's just liking the way somebody looks or dresses or whatever. It's not like I have, I love these topless dancers. No, I loved writing about the way they danced, the way they looked, the way they behaved. I believe if there's anything I'll ever be remembered for, it might be, these topless dancer poems. So
all right, so why don't you leave us with one of your poems? I don't care which one.
I'll read you Master's Return.
All right.
Basically, it's about a guy, he's coming home, and a dog is upstairs in the apartment awaiting his return. Okay? The muffled growl below, the engine putters to a halt. Above, the swung bell shakes on collared neck. With outstretched paws, he taps and slides on sounding wood. Wide ears pin back to hear the pavement scrape, to wait in nearly padded bliss, the slow arriving up the stairs. His soul he wags. The doorknob turns, the door whirs open, then springs to burrow his kind head into his master's hands. Later, he lies outstretched upon the rug, one leg drawn straight, the other tucked below his chin. His master unconcerned, blind sleeping on the couch. Like a deep and introverted thinker now he rests, yet unself-conscious and totally without a thought of why it is it's he who loves and he who's left alone.
Nice job, J. Carl. Thank you. Pamela Hull was an interior designer and painter in Manhattan for most of her life. Then her husband died, and at the age of 60, she wrote her first book about their marriage. It changed her entire life. She started writing every day, and 15 years later, she's written 3 books. This is the second one for Paige. It's entitled Moments That Mattered.
There were certain things that I thought about through my life now and then, and I've been giving them thought lately, and they're not big things, but very ordinary moments in a life that we pass over or don't even think about, but in hindsight are life-altering. And I discovered some very important universal and human insights, and I thought, everybody has these, but nobody looks at them, and how different their life might be if they did that. And things like feeling an outsider at camp when I was 13, and then realizing that for various reasons, many of the insider groups that looked popular, the kids all had outsider emotional issues. When I was 50 years old, discovering in a casual way that my mother was married twice before my father and how that changed everything. When I was 8, and at a picnic kind of party, and discovered in a certain way various family relationships going on before me, and I realized about the mystery of human relationships, all kinds of stories like that were not very dramatic at the time, but that proved to be very dramatic. So I had a book launch April 7th, but I spoke at Locust Grove up in Poughkeepsie, an historic site, to a group of writers who want to know how to write memoir. And I have different colleges. This is all just happening now. Rutgers and Vassar, and I think Columbia, lining up various libraries in Westchester. Just a lot of different places.
Do you have a connection with them?
Some I do, but some I don't. I just write, give synopsis of my books, tell them a little bit about myself, tell them to look into my story, and they get back very positively to me and want to. I do this on my own.
This is all very valuable information for other writers that are listening, many of whom have a hard time selling their book. You know, they're afraid to put out that email or make that phone call, and so this is all very valuable, you know.
Well, it is very difficult, but I will say, I mean, I spend a lot of time on the computer trying to find a fairly marketable focus group for my books. It's not just, let's say, a general novel fictional thing. And you have to be extremely determined, and I would say somewhat aggressive, because you have to find these places, you have to write to people, you have to give them the information that they want. You can't be shy about wanting to get your book out there, and you have to know sort of target audiences and look for that as much as you can. Once you're into the life of the writer and how you look at the world and how everything you see means something, and here I'm writing a book about ordinary moments that are life-altering. Everything I do has some significance for me. You know, my first book with Page, Say Yes, Flying Solo After 60, is all about taking your life to a higher level that you ever thought possible after loss.
Great to know that that's possible, Pamela. Thank you. We have to take a short break, but we're coming right back. This is the Page Publishing Book Club.
Have you written a book and want to get it published? Then now's the time to call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099 and do it immediately. You see, they're looking for authors of all types of books. And unlike most publishers, Page Publishing will take the time to review most of the books submitted to them. And they'll even give you their feedback. And if they like what they read, Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, the Apple iTunes Store, and other outlets. They'll handle everything: copyright protection, printing, cover art, publicity, and editing. So if you've written a novel, a children's book, a cookbook, inspirational work, a book of poetry, or biography, and want to get it published, then you need to call Page Publishing and do it immediately. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. Your road to fame and fortune could very well start with this simple phone call. For your free author submission kit, call Page Publishing at 800-204-6099.
We are back on the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. When Mohammed Abdullah witnesses social injustice, he takes note of it. Over the years, he's written down his thoughts and decided one way to become a change agent would be to compile his thoughts into a book and hopefully inspire others to take action. It's entitled Cause and Effect, The Political Redemption.
It's a social guide, something to go by for everyone. My intent is to ignite a world debate. For example, last night I was watching on the news several different cases where a person is convicted of murder, but at the same time, they're being given a $2 million bond, or rape, and they get a bond. Why should the tragedy of someone else be used to market? You know, it's like the more wicked the crime, the bigger the bail. These are questions that I have. So I thought I'd just write it down and post them to the world. Let the world see, you know, what they think about it, you know. The other thing is war, terrorism. I'm opposed to people killing each other because they have different ideas. different ways of living, religious concepts. These are things that we should not kill each other over. And then the competition in so-called religion, where all the different denominations feel that they're the ones, they're the better than the other. And so we fight and kill each other over these so-called religious ideas. You know, things like that, social bias. A while back, I asked Google, what is the definition of hate crime? And then I Googled the definition of racial profiling, and the definitions are the same. So these type of things, you know, I wanted to put them in a forum to ignite a world debate, you know, because I feel like right now, because of technology, everybody has the most powerful thing, which is the ability to speak, to have a voice now. So if these things can be discussed and come to some type of conclusion, then it could make things a little different, a little better.
Nice.
Over the years, I would just print the book myself, and I would sell it and have discussions just one-on-one. I've been doing this for 20 years. So now I have the opportunity, you know, to do it on a larger scale, you know.
Go out and talk to people one by one and take a copy of your book with you.
Exactly. My goal is for this to be a social curriculum as well as a academic high school, college curriculum. I want it to be a part of life. So the things, when I read the book myself, it moves me. So I believe that anyone that reads my book, it will move them.
All right, Mohammed, thank you. David King Jr. works in the mortgage industry and spends his evenings writing into the wee hours of the morning. He started writing as a kid, but didn't take it seriously until after his parents died, and he decided it was time to write that book he always wanted to. It's entitled Humans versus Monsters. So where did this come from?
Just from my love of something my dad gave me, something that I picked up on my own. Just loved the old movies from the 50s and 60s and loved alternate reality things. And I grew up loving Jules Verne, H.G. Wells, writers like that. So it kind of comes a little bit from all of that. Loved World War I. I love the historical characters from the time. And the story itself, the world's emerging from the Great Depression. You have America, France, Russia, and England on one side. But on the other side, I pose a world where monsters exist. So you have Transylvania, which is where the vampires come from. You have the zombies who come from their own country, and the witches and werewolves who both in turn come from theirs. So they want their own piece of the world, is a way to look at it, to rule, and they want to be accepted in their own way. But the way they're going about obtaining that is probably not the right way through war. So
I like some of your names here. Luciansburg.
Mm-hmm.
Home of the werewolves, Covenia.
Mm-hmm.
Decimus, home of the zombies. And the UMN.
The United Monster Nation, their coalition name.
And they're being ruled by?
Lord Alucard, who is he's kind of united everybody, so everybody reports to him. But as the story goes, eventually what you'll see is his wife, she's pulling the strings. She's doing everything from behind the curtain. So as the book opens, they're trying to lure the human countries in with a ruse of peace to keep them at bay so they don't militarily attack them while the monsters are ready. But then ultimately what they do is turn about and hit the humans. And when the humans don't expect it, it's a large assault. They bomb some pretty big cities in Europe like the Vatican, like Moscow, Paris, Berlin. They opened up with a pretty aggressive, pretty devastating attack. They kill hundreds of thousands. And they catch the humans completely by surprise. They never see it coming.
So they're mad at the humans for just being stupid.
They are. They feel that they're the better species. They feel that humanity has had its day, and it's time for humans to step aside and let monsters rule. So they feel that they're superior species, and it's their time.
So they try to convince the humans they like them, but they really don't.
They're playing coy, preaching that they want peace. Alucard is just to keep the humans at bay, and so they don't think an attack is coming. And like I said, then they turn around and hit them. Humans never see it coming, and it's pretty devastating. I envision it being 5 books. The next 3 will be shorter than the first one. The first one, obviously, as you can tell, is pretty big because of everything that was put into it character-wise. And then the 5th book will be very big as it ends. But I intended being at least 5 books, and I can definitely say here on the phone with you that at least half the characters won't survive. So don't get too attached to the characters, because I definitely, the way I look at it is, if you want realism, not everybody can survive, so characters have to die. That's to me realism, and if you don't, then it's not real.
All right, David, thanks. Robert Myer is a truck driver from Louisville. He's been writing since 1989. He has 3 books, all handwritten. Are You Really Alone After Midnight is his first book of short stories.
It's one of those things where you take some of what your life is about, and as a young child, my life was not bed of roses, but, like I've got different type of stories, and some of them are about haunted houses. Some of them are about space travel.
Do you have a favorite story?
I have several. I have one that's about a semi that... You've seen the movie Christine, correct?
Yes.
Well, this is called Grace from Hell. And this truck driver, really good old man, everybody, he comes into any truck stop, everybody knows him. They all know him by name, the waitresses. He's the kind of guy that he'll stand up for people if need to, and some college kids give this one waitress a hard time. Well, he tells these college kids, to lay off. Well, they proceed to follow him out as he gets ready to leave this restaurant, and they end up running the truck off the side of a cliff. Well, the truck comes back for revenge, and takes its revenge on each and every one of the kids that were involved in that fatal accident.
This sounds like the Twilight Zone.
Well, like I said, it's just a collection of stories that I built in my mind and put together, and I'm hoping by radio that the word gets out. I've got a lot of people back here home that would love to hear about it. I've had, just off the top of my head, about 250 people that I've talked to over the course of time since I've had this book published, friends and family and all, said they'd buy a copy as soon as I could come out.
I would invite them somewhere, do some readings, do some book signings.
That is a plan.
Yeah.
That's the plan. I really would like to be able to eventually put these books on audio, because audio is big in the trucker world.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I mean, drivers put CDs in all the time and listen to them,
Right.
And they sell them a lot in the truck stops.
Well, there you go, Robert, a book signing at your truck stops. Finally, Randy Riedel is an engineer at a 24-hour industrial facility. He wrote most of his book entitled Engineered for Success during his 20s and 30s, and about a decade later finished it when he decided it was time to share how his work life is tied to his spirituality.
I was starting my career thinking about the book title itself and Engineered for Success. I mean, I'm an engineer, looking at what's my calling as a Christian believer, what's my calling in the work world, and how am I to go about that? And a lot of people get stuck in the weekly grind and lose sight of the sense of purpose in work, lose our passion, our energy. And I wanted to live, my life as God desired. And we spend majority of our lives working. You think about it, and we ought to know what the Creator says about it. So I started studying, started reading, trying to figure out, where's my place in the working world as a believer, and I wanted to share that with others. And as I wrote down, as I do on everything I read and study, I usually take notes and outline, and things just kind of morphed into collective writing. And there's very little written about the subject of that book, and from in the church and a biblical worldview about people and their work. And I wanted to put some biblical truth to that concept of our work. And so that's kind of how it came to be. And years later, I started looking at it and I thought, this thing's kind of evolving into this, and it kind of entered my mind about it.
So it makes you feel like, your work plays a spiritual role in your life.
Absolutely. We've all been called, and that's, read the first principle in my book, God ordained work. So critically important to having a successful, fulfilling life is us to do that as He intended, and just have that perspective on it. So many people look at work negatively and look at it in a bad light, and that's either they have the wrong perspective of work or they're doing the wrong thing. I don't dread going to work. I love what I do. God placed me here. He gave me that skill set, and we want to make the most of it, of our time here. And all the principles in there are common sense, practical things, and which I found God's Word to be very practical and applicable. He is the creator of everything we are, and so he's got the instruction manual for us, and that's what this kind of became.
I would think this would be really helpful for young people starting out in the workforce.
Absolutely. And, because it was for me, as I was a young person in my early 20s, they're all searching. They're all trying to figure out where's my place in the world,
Right.
So, and that's where I was in my life. And it really, that's what drove me then. That's kind of what motivated me to complete it a little bit and to share that with others. But it's really for anybody searching for God's will in their work. Anybody looking for ways to be more successful in their work. And at the same time, if you read the book, you'll see God in your work. You'll see what his plan was, and you'll find some motivation within. And I felt God's calling to follow through with the publishing a lot of times, but I made excuses not to do it. And a couple of years ago, I guess, my father was diagnosed with a late-stage cancer, and I really got to thinking about that, and I knew I had to start the process. Fortunately, I didn't get it completed. I was a couple of months shy of getting it completed before he passed away, but there's a dedication in the first part of the book to my father, who was a great role model for me and how to work as a Christian and as a biblical worldview. And he was a great example of working hard and doing things the right way. And so that kind of gave me the last motivation, I guess, to follow through with it.
All right, Randy, great inspiration. Thank you. And that's it for this edition of the Page Publishing Book Club. Thanks to all of our authors who joined us tonight, and thank you for tuning in. If you missed anything on this show or you want to check out another episode, you'll find our podcasts at 710WOR.com. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini.